everybody! Welcome back to Miss Mason's online second grade classroom. So today we are going to continue learning about the human body, and we're going to move on to lesson 2 about Anton Van Leeuwenhoek. So if you would like to follow along, you can open up your packet. It has page 30 on the bottom. I know not all of the pages have page numbers, but the stories also always do. So it's page 30. So you have to look for the page numbers because it's not actually the 30th page in the packet. So, last time we learned just a little bit about Anton Van Leeuwenhoek. We learned that he was born in Holland over 400 years ago, so that was a long time ago. His name means someone who lives on the corner of Lion's Gate. And he's one of Nick Nutri's, our guide for this unit, one of his heroes. So, I'm going to give us a little hint, hint, wink, wink, blink, blink. He's one of his heroes because he discovered something amazing that scientists are still using today. So while you're listening to the story, I want you to be listening to try to figure out what was this amazing discovery that he found, that he created. So I'm going to move over to our pictures for the day. And you can follow along, like I said, in the story. We're on page 30. Hi, boys and girls. Last time we were together, I said I would tell you something about Anton Van Leeuwenhoek. Today, I plan to do just that. But first, I want to tell you a story about me. When I was about your age, one day my father came home with a present for me under his arms. When I first opened it, I wasn't sure what it was. What do you think this present his parents got him is? It looks something like this. Do you know what this does or what it is called? My father explained that it was a microscope. That was nothing I have ever dreamed of wanting. I spent most of my time playing outside and could barely sit still to read a book. Why would I want this funny looking instrument? So a microscope is actually pretty cool. It's something that you use to look at something and it makes it bigger. So you would put the object right here on the glass and then you would put your eye through it up here and you would look down and it would make things bigger. It would make things, and if you wanted to make it even bigger, you could turn these knobs and each one of these little knobs has a different level of magnifying that makes it even bigger or just a little bit bigger. You are so curious about everything. I thought perhaps you'd like to see what a butterfly wing looks like up close, my father said. I peered through the lens, that means he looked through it, of the microscope and saw the tiny veins and hairs of a butterfly's wing. I looked at the insect's eyes and blades of grass. I looked at oat leaves and dead bumblebees and toy soldiers. It was the best present I have ever received. So this is what it would look like if you were looking through the microscope at the butterfly's wings. You could see the veins and the different colors. Have you ever used a magnifying glass? Who can tell me what a magnifying glass is used for? Yes, it magnifies objects. It makes objects look hundreds of times larger than they really are. It shows things that are too small to see with the human eye alone. Sometimes people use magnifying glasses to read really small print or to find splinters buried deep in the skin. Well, a microscope is a lot like that, but a whole lot better. So what does that have to do with Anton Van Leeuwenhoek? Well, just like me at 7 years old, the year I received my first microscope, Anton was very curious. He had a fascination with magnifying objects, so making them look bigger. Although Anton was not a scientist, his work with microscopes changed the way people thought about the human body and how it works. At At 16, Antoine began working in the textile business. His shop sold cloth, buttons, sewing supplies, ribbons, and lace. His customers were very particular, expecting the very best textiles or cloth for their suits and dresses. Antoine used magnifying glasses to make sure that the threads of the cloth were straight and tightly woven. His customers appreciated Antoine's careful observation. So an observation is looking really closely at something for the details. He was about 30 years old. Antoine took his first trip home from Holland to nearby England. Then he discovered a book called Micrographia, meaning small images. Written by Robert Hooke, the book was full of drawings and descriptions of objects seen through a microscope. Antoine was fascinated by how large and detailed the micro or small objects looked when seen through the lens of a microscope. It was a little like someone with poor eyesight putting on eyeglass lenses for the first time and discovering the blurry tree in the distance was actually made of individual leaves. He could not wait to get home to experiment with his own objects. So these are all really, really tiny objects that Robert Hooke was able to see with the use of his microscope. Upon his return to Holland, Antoine began to build his own single lens microscope. So that means there's just one lens in it, right here. He shaped his lens very carefully, grinding them down with sand and polishing them with smooth putty. Anton's simple microscope magnified objects from 50 to 200 times their natural size. Anton had been interested in science and nature ever since he was a boy. And now he had the opportunity to study nature at a much closer range. He queried squiggly worm-like insect larvae around in his pocket, eager to watch the entire life cycle of insects with the aid of his microscope. Who remembers the life cycle of insects? There's 2 different kinds. How many stages is in the complete metamorphosis life cycle? 4. The egg, larva, pupa, and adult. How many in the incomplete? 3. Egg, nymph, adult. So he wanted to see those stages that would happen in between the life cycles. Using the microscope he made for himself, he studied people's skin, mosquito wings, and sheep hair. He observed duck hearts, fish scales, cow eyes, and water buds. What a strange man, others thought. But this patient man was driven by his curiosity, and he wanted to learn more. He never lost interest in the scales of a gnat's wing or of the hairs on a fly. He looked at the same thing again and again, comparing, measuring, and recording his findings. Antoine conducted many experiments with water, drinking water from his well, water from lakes, and from the sea, rain, and melted snow. He discovered what looked like tiny little animals in lake water. He called these little animals animalcules. Antoine claimed he never even saw more animalcules swimming about in the rainwater. They were everywhere, he said. He estimated or guessed that 1,000 of these tiny creatures could fit on the tip of a pin. So a pin is even smaller than the tip of a pencil. People called him a liar and a magician, thinking that he was quite mad, and this meant for now, it doesn't mean mad like he's angry. It means mad like he's crazy, like he didn't know what he was talking about. But in fact, Anton was not mad at all. His little animals were not really animals, but they were definitely alive. He was the first to observe and describe many tiny living things in nature, not visible with the naked eye, including bacteria or germs. Many scientists believe that these tiny life forms had been on Earth for more than 3 billion years. They surround us in air, water, and on land. But no one was aware of their existence before Antoine recorded what he saw. He discovered a whole new world. So, what did Antoine discover? Yeah, he discovered bacteria or germs. That is what he discovered. Ever curious, Antoine began studying the saliva from inside of your mouth. So your saliva is your spit. He discovered even more bacteria. He found that the sticky coating on the outside of your teeth was crawling with millions of tiny organisms or living things. You have them too, but don't worry, they won't hurt you. We'll learn more about them another day. Antoine kept a journal or a book where he can write down his thoughts to record every detailed observation he made with 2 English doctors who belonged to the English Royal Society of London. They told him that their fellow English scientists kept similar journals to share their scientific discoveries, and they invited Antoine to share his work with them. And so, for the next 50 years, Antoine sent hundreds of letters to England. His letters described in great detail the tiny structures that he saw through his homemade microscope. He described fungus on stale bread, the stingers, eyes, and mouth of bees, even tiny lice. Because he could not draw very well, Antoine hired someone to illustrate his writing, so someone to draw pictures to go along with it. The English Society loved everything he sent and published his letters for others to read. Anton Van Leeuwenhoek did not discover or invent the microscope, nor was he the first one to use it. But he used his own simple microscope more than most people of his day. Compared to the modern microscope, Antoine's was simple indeed. It was even more simpler than microscopes used in his day. The entire instrument was only 3 to 4 inches long and could be held in one hand, close up to the eye. Antoine's microscope used only one lens. Modern microscopes have 2 or more lenses, one in the eyepiece that you would look through, and one through the eye, or one at the bottom, at the end of the tube or barrel to enlarge things even more. Today, objects are put on glass slides to be viewed. These objects remain in one place. It's the lenses that would move up or down, not the objects. Instead of keeping the objects in one place, Antoine mounted his objects on the end of a sharp pointed pin, sticking up in front of the lens, and moved the object instead of the lens. Antoine's invention required good lighting and good patience to use. His lenses were the clearest and most powerful lenses of his day. But he never shared the secret for creating them. No one came close to matching the quality of Anton Van Leeuwenhoek's microscope for more than 100 years after his death. Of the 400 microscopes that Antoine is believed to have made, no more than 9 exist today. Antoine is one of my heroes, for he was the first person to describe bacteria, tiny living things not visible with the naked eye. And his discovery of bacteria made it possible for others to see small living things, such as small building blocks of life on Earth. The next time we meet, I look forward to teaching you about the amazing body's building blocks. So, what was Anton Van Leeuwenhoek's important discovery? What did he discover, or what did he find? Yeah, Anton Van Leeuwenhoek discovered bacteria. He discovered those are tiny living things, not visible with your naked eye. And don't laugh. That just means that it's just your plain eye, that you're not using a microscope or glasses to be able to see it. So what instrument made Anton Van Leeuwenhoek's discovery possible? What did he use to discover the bacteria? Yeah, he used a microscope. Remember, his was just a single lens microscope, so it looks a little different than the microscopes we use today. If you could describe him with one word, what word would you use to describe him? And I can't hear you with this one, so you'll have to text me your words and then make sure that you're telling me why you would use those. So, now you can go ahead and turn your packet to the questions after the story. So our question today says, what did Anton Van Leeuwenhoek discover? We already went over that one, so if you forgot, make sure you rewind the video to find the answer. The next one, match the vocabulary words with the definition. So the words are bacteria, magnifies, microscope, and observation. Again, if you need help with some of those vocabulary words, I would recommend going back and listening to the story so that you can find the correct answers. Then on the back is just another comprehension question about Anton Van Leeuwenhoek that you can go ahead and answer independently. Make sure that you check back on Friday for our next lesson on cells and tissues. And I don't mean the tissues that you're blowing your nose with.